Welcome to today's video. Today's video is an intense review of the EO Mini Pro and how it works. Now, if you're thinking of getting an electric vehicle charger or you're thinking of installing electric vehicle chargers, then you want to make sure you're getting the right product for your customer, and also you, the customer, are getting a product that fits your needs for the future. The last thing you want to do is shell out on an expensive electric vehicle charger to find out the day you had it or a couple of years later that it doesn't do features that you wanted to do. If you're looking for a local installer for you, check out rightcharge.co.uk/EVNick, who will help find a local installer for you. Before we get to unboxing the EO Mini, let's talk about some of its key features. First of all, it's available in a wide choice of colours. So the standard colours are black, white, silver and blue. It's available in an untethered option like this, where you use your own cable from your car, or a tethered option with the cable built in. It's a single phase unit only. It can do less than 7 kilowatts if you had a reason for, but it also has load balancing, so you can connect a CT clamp to your load and make sure it's load balanced. And there is also an option for using solar, so using extra solar and charging that way. Very, very small charge point, one of the smallest on the market, and very, very compact. Like many, it uses an off-the-shelf component. So that's an off-the-shelf waterproof component that you can just basically, they bought off the shelf, they drilled holes in it and made it for a charge point. Now, these ugly points here, they are able to be covered up. There is bungs inside, which we'll go over in a minute. And what do we have in here? We have how to download the app, to get the app working, how to connect it to Wi-Fi. So quick installation guide for the installers. We also have the warranty information. Now, people probably don't know this, but all OLEV chargers have to have 3 years warranty. If you're having it installed under OLEV, it has got a warranty for 3 years. This here is about how to set the current limit. So it will be set to a certain current limit. You can change the current limit. You could do this if you've got a certain low amp fuse or for various other reasons. This is just how to sort of make sure it's all installed and installer's checklist, that's actually quite a nice little feature. I like the fact that they've actually given a checklist for the installers to go over and ensure that they've installed it correctly. We've also got a quick user guide. Do you drive a Model 3 Tesla? We have some recommendations on the back of the slip to get the most out of your EO charger. And there's some stuff here about Sentry mode, etc., and customer service, which we can go into when we tried the Model 3 on it. So here's a quick installer's guide, quick user guide, which I'm a bloke, so I'm not going to read that, let's be honest. This is a Type 2 untethered socket, and there's a little sticker here saying, before installation, please check suitable Wi-Fi signal property location. You could do what I've done, which is just fit in that location a power over Ethernet device, so you could do that. We got it open. So very first sort of criticism that I have with this unit is this part of the unit is the unit you're going to screw to the wall. This is the fixed part of the unit to the wall. This unit is the unit that will, with these plugs, will connect into this back unit here. My criticism with this unit is that the live, neutral and earth are here and will be effectively dangling in mid-air until this has been plugged in and screwed together. I do feel that this part of the unit should always be on the back plate, just for installers and make things easier. Now, if you're an end user, you're not going to care once it's been installed, but I just think from an installing point of view, this should always be on here, and then a connector block from there to there should be done that way. That's just my personal method of doing it, the way I think it would be better for installers and make it easier. It's very, very tight in here. There's quite a few electronics for doing various smart parts of the car. It's got Wi-Fi enabled. On this plate it's got most of the tech. So in here we've got an SD card. This SD card I'm going to assume is for reading and writing of logging data. You can take the chip out and replace it if you wish. I'm going to assume there's also probably some software ways of updating things on there in case you haven't got Wi-Fi signal and various other bits, but the fact that it's removable does make it mean if it gets full or clogged with data, like the Model S and X is used to get logging data issues, you can actually remove the chip and replace it with a different chip. There's also a USB type socket here, and then some other USB type sockets here. These look like USB-Cs, I guess, and this just looks like a standard flat end USB. We've also got two CT clamps here. They're labelled 1 and 3. 2's not soldered on. I'm going to assume there's a reason for that, but that means you can do load balancing and solar divert with the system if they came with it, but it doesn't come with any CT clamps. And then you've got here, which is the connector block for this one here, and then a connector block for this one here. Now I do like the fact that the plugs are completely different, so an installer couldn't accidentally put them in the wrong way, so that makes the installer's life a hell of a lot easier. The Wi-Fi aerial here is in the top of the roof, so you should have pretty decent signal, but again you could do what I've done with the power over Ethernet system. Now if I bring this part of the unit up towards you, there's a couple of bits inside that I need to show you. So first of all, we've got some dip switches just down here, which hopefully you can see. That's for doing some various parts for the installs. And then just on the left of that, we have a current selector switch for changing the current selection, depending on obviously what you've installed, if it's a 16 amp, 32 amp, etc. So all in all, pretty compact, pretty small charge point, one of the smallest. Let's see what it's like once it's installed. Now, installing this unit was actually quite difficult, and I'll tell you why. It's not the obvious reason what you'd think. It's actually because I couldn't get the ferrule connections in the electric terminals. Now, these are screw terminals, they're not a Wago style block, which I prefer. And to be fair on EO, this terminal connection that I'm using, these ferrule connections I've been using, have been used in about 3 or 4 charge points before this for all these testing and demonstration of these videos. So I ended up getting my spare cable out, which is the one that we now see here, not the one that's already embedded in my wall. And because I've used this one, I ended up trying to install it inside because I thought it'd be easier because of the awkward faceplate at the front that's not connected, which is probably the other reason I struggled to get these ferrules in. I still struggled to get the ferrules in. They were a really tight squeeze. It just feels that EO have used one of the smallest rated 240 volt connection blocks they can find. It just doesn't feel very roomy. The ferrules were just a little bit too long, so they needed trimming down a bit so they didn't hang out of the connection terminal. And it's the only charge point that I've had this issue on. So yeah, not great start. And yes, it was an awkward install, made more up for the fact that the electrical terminals are on the front faceplate and not screwed on the back. So yeah, a little bit annoying. However, unlike the other charge point that looked very, very similar to this one, there was more room in there for cables. I didn't feel like I was squashing cables in. There's a lot of room in there. There's more than you think, and it's quite slack in there, believe it or not. And that might be because this unit doesn't have built-in pen fault detection like the similar looking unit I did about this. That is because EO unit here is a fairly older designed unit. I do expect that EO will probably redesign this unit soon and have pen fault in, but at the moment this doesn't. So if an installer is installing it, they'll tend to install it by the side of a Mati or a Garrow device, and EO recommend Garrow to go with this. But that's probably why there's a bit more slack in there. Now I've pulled a Cat 6 cable in here for using my CT clamp option. So on this I'll be doing load balancing and a solar diversion test to see how it deals with solar. So even with that cable, this cable, there is quite a bit of room, and that is the only saving grace. But personally, I feel there needs to be a redesign on how this is installed. Now, once we've got the power connected to the front faceplate, we need to power the back faceplate via the Raspberry Pi is and all the computer electronics, and then you do that by the ribbon cables that are supplied and plug them in. Again, it's the wrong way round. It should be the computers are at the front and the electrical connections at the back, but EO have done it backwards. We'll let them off. They have one saving grace that I was really impressed with. They have a clever little thing in here that will find out if engineers have not installed things correctly or read the manual. And that's because there is a current amp selection switch inside this unit, and if it's not set to the amps that you're required to use, maybe it was a DNO rating to only 16 amps because of a max fuse issue, or you've got multiple EV chargers. But anyway, if you haven't set that correctly, EO will know, because when you go to install it on the installer's app, it won't let you install it, which what caught me out. and I rang up and they said, yes, we actually use this to find out if installers haven't been taking our courses and installing correctly, so we can, reprimand them and make sure that they're doing the job right, which is actually a really, really good idea when you've got millions of people that you don't know installing these units all around the world. And if you want to keep an eye that they're installing them to your specifications, having little fail-safes like this that will trip the people up who haven't done the install manual, like it did me, is a great idea for catching them out. So once you've got that set to the correct setting, you plugged it in, you screwed it all up, you put it on, you're going to download the EO app as an engineer and go for the install process. Pretty easy. You scan the barcode, you tell it if it's a wired, as in you've put an Ethernet connection in, or if it's a wireless connection, and you set that. You set the CT clamps if you've installed them. You can just use one CT clamp for solar if you just want to do solar and not load balancing. I've got both in here. Set the ampage for each of those CT clamps and off you go. Now I've extended the CT clamps again with Cat 6 cable, and then just basically Wago blocked them inside my electricity consumer unit and screwed them straight in here. Screwed them straight in here is quite easy. Again, no complicated tools, just a nice little plug that's pre-designed with a screw terminal. Screw it on, plug it in, and I like these toolless ideas. They're a lot better than buying a crimping tool or using crimping tools, because you can't always get a great crimp, as a lot of engineers will know. So I do actually think that's a really good idea off EO. Now, as a good customer, you've already downloaded the EO app, haven't you? Brilliant. You've set up all your settings, you've got all the stuff ready. So all your engineer has to do is tell you to scan this barcode on the side, use your Wi-Fi password, and set it up for you, and then the Wi-Fi should be done. Now, if it's a wired unit, you don't have to go through obviously setting the Wi-Fi up, but it's self-explanatory, that part. The customer app and the engineer app are the same app, but you will not see any of the installer side. That's turned on EO's side, so it means that you have to be an engineer to change the internal settings on this, which is, in my mind, preferred, because it means that people can't just go and download the engineer app off the App Store and start messing around with settings inside here that they shouldn't do. So that's all turned on EO's side. EO can remotely change some of the engineer settings. If you're a customer and you want to change various little settings in your solar diversion, your CT clamps, if you ring EO, they should be able to change them on their end without an installer coming out. So again, another really clever feature that you can do stuff like that. Now, the app, first of all, pretty well designed, quite like it. Couple of errors. In the installer side, if you mess around unticking and reticking CT and load management boxes, it won't let you just tick solar only afterwards, and you'll have to restart again. Reported the error to them. They're going to fix it as soon as possible, they've told me. Second small issue, you can only input the new unit as an installer and also as a customer by scanning the barcode. You can't just put the serial number in. So if the code's worn off or got dirty, or your phone's camera's not working, you can't do anything. I imagine EO could probably do it in the back office, or there is a way in the app and it's just not obviously in the app, and I couldn't see how to do it. So yeah, I struggled to find that part of the app. There's a couple of other small little issues in the app. First of all, the solar and CT clamps are not updating very quick. They're not live. And this is an issue because this hasn't got any screens built in, so I'd like it to update a bit quicker. Now, I'd expect it to update almost immediately if connected to the local Wi-Fi network on this, which it doesn't. I also would expect it to just be a little bit more responsive or give more detail. The solar and CT clamp information just feels a little bit dull. I don't know what it is about that page. You let me know in the comments, but it just feels like it's lacking more information. It doesn't really tell you if they're connected or if it's working. If both figures are on 0 amps, how do you know the CT clamps even, you've installed it correctly as an engineer, or the customer doesn't know it's come off? It just feels a little bit dull. So I hope that EO redesign just make it feel a little bit better. Now, a couple of the other things the app lets you do is it lets you lock the charger so no one else can use it. It lets you unlock the charger so people can use it. It also has some settings where you set what car you've got, and you can tell it what percentage of charge you started on before you started the charger, and then that can give you an indication of when the car will be full or what percentage of charge it is, at the moment. Now, it's an estimate, so if you say you've arrived home with 20% charge, you're 70% charge, and you set that in the app, as the charger charges up, it will predict roughly where it thinks it is on battery charge. It's a shame it's not got some sort of integration in there with the car's API like some other charge companies have got running. that would be quite a good idea. It's also got some other limitations in there. We got the option of scheduling charges, so you can set a scheduled charge for whichever time you want. You can set an off-peak and on-peak tariff, and there is some pre-selected options there for Octopus Go and EDF. At the moment, you'll notice there is no option for agile and dynamic pricing like agile. There is no option there. You can set predefined times, but you can't set something that's dynamic and constantly changing. So I imagine that's coming, because I've probably mentioned before, but EO and Octopus are linked partners, so I imagine that is in their workflow to sort this. There is a Raspberry Pi in there, so it's got the computing power that can do it. Now, another small little thing which I thought was quite a neat little idea is there's the option of solar charging, and there are set hours that you can set the solar charging. Now, there is a couple of reasons this is useful and a couple of reasons I think EO have added it. So first of all, reasons it can be useful. You can say, you're going to start generating some solar around about sort of 6, 7 o'clock in the morning when the sun comes up. So you can say from 6, start charging on solar, or start from 9, and then you can end it when you know the sun's going to go in. Now, the reason you'd set the end time is because if you had a battery and solar on the same part of your setup, the way it's set up, what could happen in some circumstances is the car carries on charging, the sun goes in, and then the battery starts draining back to your house, thinking you're using appliances in the house, when the charger will just carry on sucking that battery out and drain your battery, which is not what you want. If you've got solar battery and solar, you want the battery to be remained for other stuff, especially if you've got this set to solar. So by setting an end time when you know the sun goes in, it means that you won't drain your battery. The other reason I think EO have got a start and end time on this is it's my biggest issue with this being used for solar is it constantly draws 6 amps regardless of what solar output is. So if solar is 0, you'll draw 6 amps. If solar increases, then yes, of course, the solar ampage will increase. If you start producing 10 amps of solar, you'll charge the car at 10 amps. But it always charges at 6 amps, unlike other EV chargers that can pause the charge. EO have decided not to do that in this unit. And I think that is a little bit of an oversight, and I think that they should add it. The other thing that I think EO should add to this unit is we've got 2 CT clamps at the moment. One for load management and one for solar. I'd much prefer if they gave us more use over these 2 CT clamps. So you could use CT clamp 1 for battery storage and CT clamp 2 for solar, or other way around. I also would like the option of changing which one is connected to which, just in case you as an installer or you as a person have put them the wrong way round and you want to switch them over without opening the unit and switching them over. Another little thing I like in the app is there is a history setting, and you can see how long you've charged for, and if you input your tariff information in there, you can see how much those charges are costing. I like the way this is designed. I like the way you can download it and email it to yourself. It's very good, especially if you're charging an electric vehicle for work and you want to send them costs and bills for how much you've charged, or you're trying to claim it on self-assessment if it's a work charger. It's just very, very neat, and I like the way that's done. One of the big pluses on the app. Another small minor point that annoys me on the app is there is no way to do firmware updates, and there is firmware updates on this, but EO will just push it to your unit. Firmware updates are automatic, so as long as the unit is online, they'll just push firmware updates to it all the time. Now, this does slightly annoy me. First of all, I'd like to have the option of selecting when to do a firmware update, just in case that you started doing one when you want to plug the car in or when you want to use something on the charger. I'd rather have the control of doing a firmware update. Also, from my software days, I always like to wait for a firmware update. It's been out for a while, just in case that the firmware update released has a bug in it that the developers haven't noticed because they haven't tested it as rigorously as thousands and thousands of users are using it. But EO did say to me that they fully test their firmware updates, and when they release it, they know there's no bugs in it, and that's why they push them. But personally, I'd rather be given the option to firmware update than be forced to have a firmware update. So to summarise, this is a tiny, small discreet unit. Now let's go some of the negatives that I found on the unit. So after using it for a while, I've also found that you cannot change the amperage it will charge at. So for some reason, if you wanted to charge your car at 20 amps, 10 amps, you can't in the app set that to any amperes that you want. If you had solar, it doesn't stop charging at 6 amps. It doesn't pause the charge like some other electric vehicle chargers, which may concern some people who just purely want to charge on solar, even though 6 amps is a very, very minuscule amount. But yes, it does not pause the charging. It doesn't have pen fault detection. So if you just have enough room to fit this and a separate consumer unit for the charger, then you're going to need a Garrow pen fault or earth rod installing as well. So yeah, that's a little bit annoying, and I do expect that EO will be bringing out a pen fault built-in system in one of these very shortly, like one of their competitors. However, a lot of big things about them. The app works seamlessly. It could do with a bit of refreshes and a couple of redesigns, but it's very, very smooth, very responsive, and works pretty much every time I've tried it. I do expect they're going to improve it with Agile integration. There's, like I said, there's a little powerful Raspberry Pi in the back of this, so I expect they're going to take more advantage of that. There is also the fact that EO, I've read a couple of people, or even when I did the eFix video, that they were talking about, what if you buy an EV charger and the company goes bust? And what happens to your app and all the smart user interfaces? And that is a big concern that I've actually never thought of before, because a lot of these companies are still in growth stage. But what happens if that happens? Well, basically you've got a dumb charger unless that company gets bought out again. The worry with that goes away for me with EO because of the size that they are at the moment. They've gone from a very small company and grown to a very large company, but they have secured some massive contracts. Just recently, they've secured a contract for Amazon to provide their electric vehicle chargers for their UK electric vehicle fleet. So a huge £1 million, multi-million pound contract there, and they keep securing large sites, large contracts like that. So I do expect the app and the app support for this unit to stay around for a very, very long time, and this unit and this company carries on innovating, and we see more and more of them. So if you are worried about that security of a company going bust and the app or the company not being bought out afterwards, it does go away with EO because of the sort of size of investment they're getting. I hope you've enjoyed this week's video. I hope you've enjoyed this week's review. If you're thinking of getting one of these units, please check out rightcharge.co.uk/EVNick, where they'll find a local installer to install one of these units for you. Thank you very, very much, and I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.